Greg, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you give us the time. And I guess a huge congratulations in order for the new title or the new role as well. I saw on LinkedIn the other day, SVP Customer Future Workforce, which is pretty cool. Tell us a little bit about that and about what's been happening in Fathom in the last couple of months.
Yeah, a couple of months, feels like a couple of years, but it's been a crazy run. Being an Australian startup, it's always it's a different challenge, I think, than most. Having to figure out how you go global from here. Mm-hmm. I joke to a lot of my friends and colleagues how this is the greatest place in the world, I believe, to live, but the worst place maybe to start a global software company from. But we had the backing about a year and a half ago. Pearson joined our kind of seed round that we did, and that put them on our board. So they were front and center to the Fathom show. And when we went out to raise capital in a Series A, they kind of came forward and said, "Hey, we've got a different proposition for you. How do you feel about joining our mission in terms of taking education to the world and changing lives? We'll fund your roadmap for the next couple of years. How does that sound?" And so that was when you're not looking for that, it's an odd moment. But I think Mike, my co-founder, and I both kind of went, "Hey, we can accelerate our mission like that. We can't pass it up." So we jumped at the chance.
Yeah, fantastic. That's brilliant. And to those unfamiliar with Pearson, sort of what family have you joined, and how does that help the Fathom product?
Yeah, so interestingly, Pearson Education out of the UK, UK-based FTSE 100, well known in higher education circles, providing that education content all over the world, but not so well known maybe in a kind of corporate workforce skilling environment. And the acquisition of Fathom is part of a major transformation that they're going through, which then formed a brand new division. So where you see my title changing, that is now kind of head of the customer business for a brand new division inside of Pearson that's focused on taking skilling to the kind of workforce out there, whether that's government, corporate, et cetera. And again, solving the same kind of problems Fathom was setting out to solve, keep people employable. I think the promise now is I can combine Fathom data and insights to actually learning content and outcomes and credentials. So that's kind of the whole problem statement wrapped up now in this division, which is pretty cool for us. And as founders, it's something we could only dream of doing that on our own. So now we get a chance to do that and deliver on that promise.
Yeah, that's great. Pete, I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm working on my patience anyway, so it's a good. It's really interesting to hear that, Greg. And obviously we've talked about joining Pearson, but can you give us a rundown on Fathom and because I'm sure listeners out there, we've kind of jumped straight in, and we probably need to take a step back and just, go over or give a brief overview of exactly what Fathom is, and maybe where the concept started and where you've kind of marched through each sort of, creation of the product to where you are at the moment, where you're kind of being funded by Pearson in their, the roadmap for the next couple of years.
Yeah, good point, Pete. So look, if we go back, just over 5 years ago now, Mike and I met for the first time. We were both out in Australia in higher education universities funding research, looking at the impact of technology on people, on work. What is that impact going to look like over the next 5 years, 10 years? And if you recall, that was about the time we were told by the infamous Frey and Osborne report out of Oxford that half of us would be replaced by robots. And so that was a fun moment in this journey. That got everyone thinking. So it built some awareness about the fourth industrial revolution, even though most people didn't realize what it was or that they had a problem. So we met, and we had similar thinking on the problem statement. We thought, hey, there's no data source out there. If you're a corporate, if you're Telstra, if you're Citigroup, and you want to figure out the impact of emerging tech on your workforce and be able to model that, understand it over 3 years into the future, and take the right actions to upskill and reskill your people to make sure you can stay competitive and your people stay employable. Hey, there was nothing out there. You could bring a global major strategic consultancy and pay a couple $1 million, and they'd give you a PDF report that says, here's the future of work for you. We felt that was a little lacking in actionability behind that. So we thought, well, why don't we replace those consultants with an AI, an actual technology that can answer those questions. And then we can start working on the real activity. Once I know the answer to the questions, I can act. I can take the action, then the right action for my business, for my company, my industry, my country, and get those people reskilled and upskilled. So that was where we began. It was very much focused on the impact of tech on work and being able to provide real, meaningful, specific data to your workforce. We then extended that. We said, hey, we've got this incredible occupation ontology, right? Every job on the planet, every skill necessary to do the job, every task the job performs. So what else could we apply that to? And of course, right about the time of the impact of COVID, we built a new AI that modeled the impact of COVID on the workforce. And so now we can start looking at not just the changing shape of the workforce, but also the changing shape of the workplace. Right. Extend forward again, and now we start talking about, hey, what about climate change? Energy transition. If I want to go from brown energy to green energy, clean energy, how do I do that? So the kind of use case in the AI keeps evolving and growing and learning, and that's the nature of it, right? Machine learning and deep learning going on within the platform. But I suppose, long-winded answer, we got to this point where Fathom could say, here's the problem, here's the people that need to be reskilled or upskilled, and in what over this period, but we could never do the skilling. And so now we can connect that to Pearson, and this is something obviously they saw, connect that to all that learning content they have. And now, if you saw, we've just acquired another company called Credly. Now we can also then give you the credential, the badge, right? To say, tell the world you know how to do this and can do it.
That's fantastic. It's a good full service offering as well. I've done a little bit of work in the micro credentialing space, and it's a fascinating space to get into. You've got the higher ed and the universities trying to tie it back to some kind of qualification standard. You've got brands running around giving people stamps because they feel like it. And then you've got people in the middle who are trying to forge this new path of qualified learning that's not necessarily part of the old world. And it's it's a really dynamic space to be a part of. So credit to you. Well done.
Thank you. You think next steps, you go, okay, well, now that I know that, who would I rather recruit? Someone who's kind of been through that and has that credential, or someone who just put their CV on my site and I have no idea if I can verify they know what to do, right? So it's a powerful outcome.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously that gives you access to and I guess exposure to some pretty amazing changes in industry. I'm going to ask you about industries in a second, but before I do, can you speak to some of the cool clients or cool experiences you've had along the way? Have you done projects that you're particularly proud of with the platform?
Wow. I mean, we've had clients in pretty much every industry and, 26 or so countries around the world. So it's been pretty exciting from that perspective. We've helped kind of big corporate organizations understand. I mean, one of those that was public and published by Zurich Insurance, where they knew that technology they were implementing was going to displace jobs. And so they used Fathom to identify that and actually kind of put aside the funding. I think it was £1 million just for a group in the UK to get those folks that were going to be displaced, over a 2-year, I think it was a 2-year horizon. And get a hold of them and get them the training they need to get them reskilled so that they would stay in that workforce. I mean, that was a very powerful statement from a well-regarded brand. And you contrast that with some of the others we've seen that say, I'm just going to fire the old skills that I no longer need. And I'm going to go hire the new, which would you rather go work for? The answer that's going to kind of prepare you, keep you engaged. I think it's an obvious answer, but we still see that old school mentality of, hey, I'll just get rid of this. People are now the old skills and I'll go figure out where I find the new skills. Guess what? They're not out there waiting for your call. You have to build them.
Yeah.
How do you find the acceptance of the fact that jobs will replace roles? Like I find, doing a lot of work in the future of work is you get the two kind of very distinct groups. There's the group that realizes or probably three then, based on what you've said, is you get the group that's just going to fire, that realizes that there's going to be a displacement and is either going to fire and then rehire. And then you get group two, which is we realize that it's going to change and we're going to do the upskilling through Fathom or some other method. And then you just get the people that are just like, oh, computer's never going to replace a person. So do you run into that third group much still, that are just, they've got the ostrich effect where they're just sticking their head in the ground and just refusing to accept that there's a technological transition that we're in the midst of that will only accelerate in the future?
Oh, I think the deniers are fewer and far between these days. I mean, when we started this, any client I met, I spent the first hour just explaining what the heck this was, right? Before we could ever get to, and I've got a solution for you. It's like, what the heck is this? What are you talking about? Yeah. So that's clearly changed. Over the last 5 years. My goodness, I now sometimes meet with someone whose title is like the vice president of the future of work, and you're like, okay, where were you 5 years ago? No, I think, the deniers are fewer and far between. I think that group has now become a group that's actually, you know what, Greg, we're growing so fast, I don't care. They're just, I'm 1,000 employees, I'm not that big, and I'm just still on this massive growth phase. And so I'm not ignoring it, but I'll deal with it later. The more worrying group, I think, is that middle one, which is still, I'm following kind of decades old HR practices in an era that can't survive with that view. So, they literally, I spoke to a group in London 2 weeks ago. I said, you guys have to blow those things up. You got to tear that infrastructure down and start over, because you need a new framework for how you deal with the problem statement now.
And where so let's go to industries then. Where are you finding, are there specific industries that are having trouble with that more than others? Are there industries that are in transition right now?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I think every industry, faces this issue. I mean, think of an industry where there's no technological impact. It doesn't exist. So everyone's got their own version of this, but I think it's quite nuanced across industries. So if I think of something like healthcare, typically not huge margins in that business, yet, today they're faced with massive shortages of nurses. Like, kids aren't going through nursing programs anymore. So, they come to us and say, how do I turn one nurse into the power of two? Well, probably through technology. So, okay, well, what part of a nurse's job could I, augment with technology? Does that free up enough capacity so that therefore my demand for nursing actually is offset by tech, and now I can actually fulfill the needs that I have in terms of nurses. So that's a different issue than maybe manufacturing, that has been going through this for decades as well, the automation. But the ramifications there of that automation are some pretty significant social issues. Most manufacturing plants aren't in your CBD. So when you shut it down, it's out in a rural part of a state, and you're like, okay, now what? What do we do with those people? What skills do they have? How can we redeploy them in that region? Is it even possible? What investment do we have to make? Contrast that with finance, where, I don't think there's an industry spending more on automation today than financial services, both banking and insurance. The investments in RP alone, robotic process automation, are unbelievable. But what did we see? MIT just, was it a month ago, 2 months ago, where they kind of came back, did a bit of research and said, remember we told you about that tech impact a couple of years ago? Well, it's actually gone faster. Bad news is companies aren't extracting the productivity. They're just automating, like without any kind of sight as to, are we getting the outcome and the productivity gains? And so they're shedding people, not seeing the productivity gains. It's a bad outcome all around. And then, maybe one to call out, I think, is significant. We're starting to do much more research in this space, or work in this space, which is energy transition. I think, there's a hindrance, a barrier, if you will, to energy transition. You want to move off of brown energy. You want to move off to clean and green. Okay, great. a lot of things have to happen to make that possible.
Mm.
Like, you want to go from coal-fired power plants to hydrogen or nuclear. Well, first thing is, what do you do with the people that work at that coal-fired power plant when you shut it down? 2,000 workers out of a job, bang. What do you do with them? Where do they go? Because it's unlikely you're going to have that green energy source sprout up right next door.
No,
it's going to go somewhere else.
And the social political impacts of that are pretty significant. Like, I remember hearing a story of an executive at one of the utilities getting pretty aggressive phone calls from particular politicians saying, you can't, I know you want to go green, but you can't shut down that coal plant. I'll block it. And you go, there's every intent in the universe trying to make sure that we're going greener. But the social impact, like you said before, on some of these decisions is pretty profound.
Yeah, that's that barrier, right? That's we all want to do this, but actually what I don't want is the front page to say, as an MP, that I just fired 2,000 people when I made that decision. So that kind of goes the other side of the coin is, then do I have the skills needed to build the nuclear plants or the hydrogen plants? And if I don't, how do I, again, what's the learning journey I'm going to provide, the skilling I'm going to provide to get those people from one side of that to the other, or build up those resources from other parts of the economy where I offer people, job kind of improvement and better pay grades and better outcomes if I can give them the skilling they need to get there.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in the social, like Dave's alluded to, the social commentary, but even the kind of the base pattern that lives underneath that, where people, we've had these industries where people traditionally, like, mining, coal, all of those sort of heavy industries, and, construction to a degree, where people go and that's what they do for their entire life, as opposed to now where, there's this transition and we want to move to green, but people don't, they just want to do what they've always been doing. And they've kind of like, well, the environment itself has physically changed. Like, there's no guarantees on any job anymore because change is so much more continual and rapid these days that, I feel like a lot of people's mindsets and cultural expectations haven't caught up to that fact that, things change so quickly and there's no guarantees anymore like there used to be. Things have changed significantly.
I think you raise an interesting point, which is I often get asked, who's responsible for fixing this? And there is no one answer. There's no one source or owner. And I think what you just raised is the individual has a role to play in this. So totally. I, as an individual, as a worker, whatever job I'm in industry I'm in, need to take some ownership of this. My life isn't just going to go on for 30 years in a job and in a nice smooth line. And it takes some dips and turns as my life changes through that. But so I have to take some ownership and understand what is my personal situation and capability and how does that relate, what's happening to my industry, my job. Obviously corporate and who I work for, we believe has more of a role to play in that than maybe some are willing to play or have in the past played. So their responsibility to the workforce and keeping me employable. And that might be with another organization, right? The same responsibility exists. If I can't reskill Greg within the workforce today in my current company, well, how do I help Greg find the job in another industry which is more applicable for his skill set? So I think there's a role companies need to pick up. And then, of course, government and higher ed obviously has a role to play in this as well. The challenge with all that is, can we get them all talking the same language with the same data set? Which of course is something we champion as a data company. But I need the higher ed system talking the same language as the employers, as the government, so that they can embark on the same journey.
I think that's probably certainly in my experience with the Fathom platform, which has been limited, admittedly, but I have seen it at work and had a bit of a play. What has been powerful for me has always been the conversation that follows. So you use the data, or you explain what we're doing, or you forecast a particular set of your workforce, and then the conversation that precedes that is the one that really opens your eyes to, they're thinking that way, or their expectations are that this workforce will move in a particular direction, and what we're seeing is that it might not. And I think even just the ability that the platform gives to break a role down into its raw components and things like problem solving skills or analytical skills or particular disciplines within that particular role gives you the ability to go, okay, I can see how this particular platform might work to solve other problems as well. And in particular, being able to even yourself go, I know that this particular group is really good at some of these skills, but not all of these skills. So if we're going to reshape the roles or reshape a department, you can anchor into some of those skills more than others as well. It's been quite useful from my perspective to even just have those conversations and kind of posit alternative futures in that space.
Yeah, I find an eye-opening moment. Oftentimes an HR team or a transformation team see their data and want to hone in on, hey, this job, it looks like 30% of those jobs are going away. Okay, we gotta go fix that. And I say, just back up 1 second. Let's look at the entire organization. The reality is not a single job is without impact.
Yes.
So every single job will have some level of impact. And it's not always what we see on the front page story about automation, right? That many jobs are augmented by tech. And that is not to be viewed as a bad thing, right? Or a negative. That it's really a positive in how I can free that job and that person up to do more meaningful work, take away the 20% of mundane routine, automate that. Great. Now, how do I reshape that 20% to give that worker a better experience and my company better productivity, better outcomes? More competitive.
The example I've used with clients is to say, go and install Grammarly on your computer. Right? That's AI and automation at work for you. That's going to give you 20% back in your day because you don't have to reread and spell check your document. It's doing it for you as you go. The impact that has on a lot of systems as you go is pretty profound. And that's not stealing anyone's job. That's just giving you time back. That's just,
Yeah. Now if you can, that's really what we try and deliver, right? If I can now show you that what task across every worker in your organization is one of those tasks that you could take away. If you could do that across the board, what kind of capacity does that release back into your workforce? That's quite powerful. And that's where we then connect not only with HR, but with the heads of automation in a big bank or in an organization, with the CIOs group. So suddenly we create a bridge between the tech strategy and the people strategy. And I can tell you that is not a common bridge.
It's not.
Those two organizations rarely work together, and that can't remain. We have to change that because they are, and in the moment right now, there are CIOs all over the world running a program to automate as fast as they can. They've been told, automate, innovate, fast as you can. Here's the money, go, go, go. And HR is sitting here going, I don't know, is that going to, mean that more women in my workforce get displaced than men? Well, if you're in a bank today, yes, I guarantee it. But they don't know that. They haven't connected the dots on that. And that's just one example. But that's a critical bridge that I think we need to build.
But it's that kind of insight that precipitates the right kind of conversation, right? Oh, you can guarantee it, right? We've seen that data. That's interesting. Okay, let's make a decision. Tell us about, I'm thinking horizontal industries or disciplines now, like HR, right? Across industries or whatever. What's going on there as far as data is concerned? Is the roles in HR changing? Are the expectations on the talent in HR changing?
Without doubt. The one thing I get a kick out of is anytime I've ever demoed Fathom to anyone in any business all over the world, I usually can't get out of the room without someone in the HR team saying, could you pull up at my role? Am I going to be, am I at risk? Am I going to be displaced somehow? And I always just go, whoa. I don't need to pull your role up. Trust me, you have plenty of work to do, right? Your role is not being displaced, but it is changing. It is being augmented by technology without doubt. So yes, it requires some new capability, new skills. I think we've seen a proliferation, of explosion, if you will, of people analytics functions and groups around the world. Strategic workforce planning groups are still they're coming. We do run into them here and there, but strangely not as common as you would think. So it's, most companies are still doing workforce planning in the moment. What do I need right now, next week?
Yeah.
Taking that up to a strategic layer, looking 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, thinking about these kind of impacts of tech and pandemic, et cetera, then making decisions. That's still in a bit of a nascent stage, depending on the kind of industry and company. But I think for sure HR is in the midst of its own kind of mini transformation and new skills.
Yep. Too busy signing off people's leave forms physically to think about the future of work at the moment. So having worked with lots of HR, it'd be interesting to see a large volume of their work be, and I like the term augmented rather than automated. Automated tends to freak people out quite a lot when, immediate replacement, where augmented is about, assisting them to make better decisions and really focus on what's valuable in the future.
Yeah, no, I think there's far too many words. The semantics around this issue for the past 5 years that we've learned do it injustice or, send us back. Calling this the future of work, this topic area, is actually part of our problem, because it's for the next minister to figure out. It's for the next CEO to face the future. That's too big. I can't tackle that. So it's interesting. And automation is another one where it's like, okay, hold on. There's actually a bigger portion of the workforce that's augmented. We just don't know about it. We don't see it because it's not in the headlines. It's not worthy of that. But we need to dig into the data, understand it at that level, and take the necessary upskilling actions as much as we're taking reskilling actions.
Yeah. Would you? Because like I said at the start, we've kind of jumped into it, and so Fathom itself is a technology platform and I remember the first time I saw it, I had like a Keanu Reeves moment where I was like, whoa, that like watching it do its thing was quite amazing. Could you give listeners maybe just a kind of brief overview of a standard engagement about how you go about, working with an organization, how all the stuff ends up in Fathom, what Fathom actually does with the data, and then what comes out the process that moves on?
I love how deep you guys are on this topic. This is great. It saves me a lot of work. So, look, it is a wow moment, because not many people know that this is even possible with technology, that you can build tech to do what we do. It's not expected. So there's a wow moment, and we take pride in that. But ultimately, if you think of Fathom, first of all, there's a huge amount of data in the platform before I ever engage with a client. So think of every job on the planet, as I was saying, just defined across every skill needed to do the job, every task the job performs. That engine is insanely robust. It covers every country in the world and every industry as well. So we have a different view of tech impact if you're in the retail industry in Singapore versus the banking industry in Dubai, right? You can have a different level of tech impact because of the different pace at which you can implement tech based on a host of data points about your country and your industry, right on down to whether your tax incentive system is going to support innovation. So it's a crazy amount of data that's in the platform. We've also then spent 5.5 years feeding it data. This thing doesn't happen. You don't build these overnight. They have to learn. Machine learning, deep learning takes data. So we have taken billions of workforce records and fed it into that engine for it to learn over this period. So that's the first thing to understand. There's a ton of data before I ever meet a client, which is part of the reason it's a very light footprint of data that we require from that client. Now, that could be the state of Texas, and we take the census for that state and every worker in it and load it up into Fathom and assess what's happening across every industry, every geography, every worker. So that fuels the response of government or higher ed to this problem. Or it could be loading up the employees of Telstra and looking at, well, what's the impact on their workforce? And so that's employee data, but it's depersonalized, which means there's no privacy laws being broken, and means we can move much quicker. But that gets specific to a company, so we can do both ends of that spectrum.
And what's I guess being a platform and something that you can go back into at any time and sort of check up on or see or try something else on. Let's say, for example, yet another black swan event happens, and it's not a pandemic or a war, but something else happens to accelerate progress in the in the tech adoption or working, in future of workspace. What is it that the platform can do for workforces should things start to accelerate again? Like, can you pull things forward or create an acceleration moment in your forecasts?
Yes, look, I mean, it's something we're always monitoring. So if I think just from the tech use case, when we started Fathom, I think we had 5 tech curves.
Yep.
And now we have 16.
Yeah, right.
But there's another 5 that are currently kind of technology areas we know exist. They're happening in some lab in Boston or something. And so someone's working on building it, but you couldn't go buy it. You couldn't go implement it. So we don't put that in the platform. Our data science team just keeps a watchful eye on those things and sees when's the tipping point where it actually is now commercialized. So that's kind of the way we approach which technology comes in. But then within which techs are in the platform, so something like RPA, we saw on the back of the pandemic a massive acceleration in the adoption of robotic process automation. Right, that was one of the big, it's a terrible thing to say, but kind of big winners in this, as we needed to automate faster. So we actually went back and remodeled, working with some of our partners, RPA, some of the biggest RPA vendors in the world. We went back in and recalibrated that tech curve to a faster pace. So the impact of that tech curve is now advanced. And we look at all the technologies we look at like that on a periodic basis to say, all right, it's time to adjust. It's going slower, faster than we thought. And some of that is fueled by the actual, what we're seeing in the clients as they use the platform as well. So that's how we approach that. I think I'm wondering if there's a sub question there, which is, well, what's the next thing?
Yep. What do you do next?
Yeah. And I think what we've said to our data scientists, and Dr. Richard George, our chief data scientist, he's just a brain the size of, I don't know, so my car, but he just is constantly out there on the edge thinking, what's next? And that's the kind of freedom we give that team. And so when the pandemic hit, we actually said to them, hey, Greenfield, you've got this ontology. What could you do to help organizations who are grappling with who should go to work and who shouldn't? New South Wales government used Fathom to define which industries go back first, second, third, based on the health risk, based on who can be more productive remotely than not. But that data science, they built a new AI, it was a neural network they built specifically for that. Now, the beauty of having the ontology in place means we can adapt quickly. Yes. And so I think it was 4 weeks, and they had this new capability that we were taking to clients. And we built it into the platform, and now it's fueling this conversation globally.
The kind of adaptability that enterprise and government only dream of, right? 4 weeks. That's pretty amazing.
Well, it helps when you're our size, and you just say, go do something cool, and luckily they can actually do that. Don't ask me to do that.
That's great. Okay, so then take us through. You upload that small footprint of data. You apply those tech curves, you look at the impact of the workforces, you start to measure the gaps. You start to see gaps in the workforce, people being displaced, roles changing. What next?
Yeah, you're spot on. This is where the good stuff happens, right? It's we can quickly, it's like weeks, and we've got new data, right? Now the important part happens. Like, what do we do with this? So let's invest our money there. Right? How do we now take action on the back of this? And I think for many HR teams, that is that big challenge. Okay, great. We're already doing all these processes already are happening, but we're doing it without insight. We're doing it without data. So what we try and explain to them is this is not a new project, another project, or more work. This is actually what you should have been doing inside of those existing programs of work. So how can you possibly do strategic workforce planning or a learning and development program if you don't understand the impact of, let's just say, AI, but we know that's a multi-headed beast and there's many other technologies, but let's just say without knowing the impact of AI on the current job and or the future job that you're trying to move to. If you don't have that in your planning, then you've kind of lost before you started. So I think it's about taking this data, these insights, and plugging them in to those existing HR processes and practices to do it in a new light, in a new data-driven mechanism. That's the big first task.
I think what the platform did for me was really crystallize the concept of cross-skilling and the idea of having a current role and a future role and saying, we don't need to lose this person. We just need to upskill them over there. So we take all the bits that we still need from them. And while we've dispensed with some of those skills, we can replace those skills by investing proportionate to the amount needed to have them useful still over here. Which is, I think, it's a pretty game-changing idea to actually say, no, we want to hold on to our people. And like you said before, what workplace would you rather go and work for, right? Someone who's going to fight to keep you, or someone who's just going to drop you at the first chance?
Yeah, but that is a challenge for many L&D programs or budgets. They aren't built to do that. They're built to say, well, what training could I give everyone? And say, I spent my budget and I'm doing something, versus no, my strategy is to take my current workforce and redeploy. And to do that, I need to provide a training program to do that. That's a different way of spending L&D dollars. So again, it's back to that. Can HR rethink that process and how they do that? If they had the data, we believe they can. But most are aren't even trying to do that. They're kind of doing I'll do the best I can with the dollars I have, and that's tends to be a leaky bucket right at the back end.
I was always quite amazed with the thing that impressed me the most was a couple of things. One, that your data sets are updating all the time, which I thought was great, and then your ability to go in and adjust some sliders, adjust some times, and then really follow the trajectory of a role through to its really finite granularity of skills and tasks, right? So go from a role, look at it at several horizons, adjust those horizons, build your own timeframes, but then, like you said, from an L&D perspective, be able to go down to, the core capabilities and then even go down to task level. And so then if you're building an L&D program, to be able to go, okay, so the program really needs to focus on these, for those particular people, needs to focus on these particular tasks rather than, one bucket of paint that we paint everyone with, which is what usually happens. And that ability to get targeted, microscopic and granular at that level, that's got to be beneficial to the output and the long-term strategy and success of the organization if you can target skill and capability increases at that level.
Well, I think where you started with that is a key message. I think that this is about scenario planning, that there's going to be a host of potential different scenario outcomes, et cetera. And, you might be looking at a 2-year horizon for a RPA implementation in finance, or you might be going, hey, what's the 7-year horizon for our business? Or, hang on, what happens out when I shut down my branch in Geelong? So there's so many different scenarios that are unfolding in this. You need the ability to, today I'm going to work on one of those, tomorrow next. And so, that's something that when we started the company, that was a big kind of mission of ours and a kind of what we thought was a success statement, is if we could deliver scenario planning as opposed to that PDF report that most people were getting as a response, that in itself would be value enough to be a success in the business. So I think that's critical, being able to scenario plan through this over time and just keep adjusting. It's never going to stop changing, always going to be evolving. We will see the next thing, whether it's tech or COVID or something else. So, be ready to react to that.
Yeah. It's something that's interesting as well, I think, because the platform is, it's a beautiful platform. You guys have done a great job with the UX. And so it's a really nice thing to go and have a look at. But to be able to go back in and even just play what if, like there are very few enterprise applications that allow you to just dive in and go, hey, what if we deleted the Geelong branch? What would happen? What if we tried this? What would happen? What if we started outsourcing this particular role? How many people would be displaced, and what could we do to keep them? Those kind of questions, to be able to ask that on a regular or semi-regular basis of a HR team or even a transformation team is pretty powerful.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. I put a lot of effort into the design myself. I really. Oh wait, no, that was not. But my design team will really appreciate it.
Yeah. We're both Dave and I are really big on UX and UI, right? If it doesn't look nice, I'm just not going to use it to start with. So
fair enough.
It's if it looks like it was written in an IBM basement in about 1985, no chance. It's got to look nice.
So tell us then, given that, and you mentioned scenario planning a couple of times and all the rest of it, like this is really a forecasting tool that allows you to scenario plan. So the value is not in the precision of the end, but in all the options of the end, right? And having presented relatively precise, but options nonetheless, so that you've got, I guess, decisions you can make. Why is that useful? And in your mind, what's the ideal way someone would use a platform like Fathom?
Yeah, I think where you've gone there is that future component. So the ability to look into the future, that is what's really critical about this, and not just being in the right now. I have job A, but I need job B. Okay, let's give some skill. Well, hang on, what if in 2 years' time the AI is going to replace job B?
Yeah.
Have you done a disservice to that person you've moved from A to B? And we talk to governments about this all the time, and they're the kind of job skilling programs they're funding are very much focused on just right now, and we're just creating a future problem statement. So I think being able to look in the future is an absolute critical part of this, and that is what makes workforce planning strategic. As a key element, but one that is often lost. If I look at the best in class, say, applications of Fathom, and maybe this is to you the second part of your question. That is organizations that, again, kind of embody the data inside of those activities, and use the data to decide who should be skilled in what, where, and when, rather than having that predetermined for them. I think about some of the learning platforms I've been in that keep offering me, hey, Greg, you're a sales manager. Here's another course in sales management. And what Greg doesn't know is that pretty soon the technology will exist that he will be irrelevant. I really hope that day comes soon.
Poor old Greg.
poor Greg. Yeah, we feel for him. Allow me to say, well, hang on, what's the tangential space I should be skilling in that takes a hold of, you mentioned, early on, micro credentials, takes a hold of what I have built in my career so far and gives me certain credit for that. And then says, okay, if you just went over here and took this, data analytics course or whatever it might be, we're actually going to improve your chances. We're going to future-proof you. And by the way, this is not all about technical skills. Greg might need to kind of pick up greater leadership agility. Some of these soft skills that are actually becoming very important, and more so important than the tech skills, to keep me employable. These are the skills that no technology can displace. So I really need to focus on what are those future capabilities that aren't going to be impacted. So giving me not the vertical path that's based on my job, but the horizontal or the kind of tangential path to say, this is what's going to keep you future-proof, Greg. Now that's learning I should be offered up and handed on a regular basis. And that's the difference of looking at data that says, here's the skills right now, versus looking, hey, here's what's happening in 3 years' time, before you decide where you should learn or what you should learn.
And just as an observation, personally, you spent 5 years forecasting the future of work. So are you seeing a decrease in those traditional discipline-led skills and an increase in those quote unquote soft skills and that leadership agility that you're talking about?
Absolutely. We've got some really interesting data in the platform now. We've just done a skills release where, in addition to our future view, we're overlaying what are organizations asking for right now in their job applications.
Yeah, wow.
So, and we look at that from two lenses. One is how often is that thing being asked for?
Yep.
And the other one is is there a specialization? Is it only asked for in that job and no other job? So we overlay those two components against that ontology, and that's giving us a really, really cool view. And it's showing us how things are morphing over time. And yes, to your question, those soft skills are coming up in importance. You look at these jobs now, here's one or two tech skills, but the importance of these soft skills is actually rising. And again, now this is a new AI we built 2 years ago. And this one is where we take our ontology and only look at those skills that are, no technology can replace. What is a robot proof version of yourself? So if I can give you all these skills, then you'll always stay ahead of the impact of technology. That's a pretty powerful place to be in, right? That's a credential I'd like to have, right? Give me the future-proof credential to keep me out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because every single technology team I work with, the ask from the senior leader is always the same, right? It's that what you talked about. It's that agility. I call it the meta glue, right? It's like you've got all these technology functions and people are off doing their things in silos. How do you get people the ability to glue those all together and cohere and coordinate, because they're all turning over at different speeds. They're all working on different things, but because work by its very nature now, due to the pandemic and remote work, is so fragmented, those skills to bring those fragments back together and glue those things back together and create value through that gluing process. Like that's the killer skill that everywhere I go, it's the thing that everyone's asking for.
It's a really cool part of the connection of Fathom and Credly. So if you think about it, there's thousands and thousands and millions of people out there with Credly credentials. They've taken their AWS certification or their Azure certification, and they've got the badge for it. They've got the credential. And what we and many have learned is they then show up for the job and they're not effective. And that's because they've just focused 100%, on the failings of many ministers out there. Teach the world to code and that will solve all our problems, right? It's not that simple. So you've got to wrap around those collaboration capabilities, problem solving capabilities that actually enable me to bring that tech skill that I had, credential I have, to life within the organization I work for.
No, that's really good. We're coming to the end of our time, Greg. Why don't, if I can ask you, we do this with each of our guests, are you able to just quickly summarize for those who have tried to keep up with our ramblings and jumping all over, what it is that you and Fathom, the AI platform Fathom, do in kind of, 3 words? What is it that you guys do there?
You want me to sum up the AI I just described with billions of data points? You say,
you've had it easy for most of the podcast, so putting the acid on towards the end.
All right, let's try keep people employable.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well done. That's good. And for people who are like, oh my goodness, I'm not a country or a state or an enterprise or any kind of government agency, but I really want to get involved in this. What is one task you can give someone in this space to go away and think about how they might keep people employable?
For themselves individually, interesting. So I'd say step 1 is awareness. So do the reading, do the research. Don't think you're just kind of safe as houses for the career you started in, no matter what your age. So do the research, create that awareness in yourself. From there, I think it is get an understanding of what those future-proof capabilities are, those technology-proof capabilities are. Now, there's other research. We've tried to design that framework in a way that doesn't shock anyone when they see it. The power of it for us is to be able to apply it to a workforce and then show you the gaps so you can take action. But you can go. There's some great research that was done. I supported out at the Foundation for Young Australians. So they put out some great research, and I helped peer review that several years ago now. But the work they did is meaningful, and again, it alludes to what are those capabilities that are going to keep me employable. So that's one thing I think you could do, and then tie that off by going and finding the education you need to get it. Some of that's paid, some of that's free. You'll find a mix of things, but it's out there. It just isn't out there on the bundle that says, here, this will keep you future-proof.
Very good. Pete, any closing questions?
I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a lot, and I think if we do too much more, everyone's brain, the fluid's going to start coming out the sides of their ears. So
we did
let them off.
We did miss the check-in question. I forgot all about it, but I had actually lined one up. So we're going to do a checkout question. It's just like a casual opinion piece before we finish up, and all three of us can answer this one. So I'll ask it and answer it, and that'll give Greg a little bit of time to think about his answer. So the checkout question is, what are you looking forward to most in the future of work? And given I came up with the question and had the advantage of being able to answer it ahead of time, I am insanely excited about Web3. And I don't mean this to get on the whole blockchain crony bandwagon and all the rest of it. I think we are at an inflection point with how the internet is used. And I think, if you think about when we first started using it and reading it, and then we started using it and collaborating and buying and sharing, I think this is one of those inflection points where we're going to do more than just collaborate and buy and share. We're going to start living and walking alongside each other in a strange kind of metaverse that isn't online blockchain gaming, but something else entirely. And I think the next 10 years, are going to be much like the 10 years that have come before, which is pretty cool, but also very hard to envision what that end state might look like. So that's me. Pete, we'll give Greg a little bit more time.
Okay. Well, not too much time.
He wants more time.
I was just going to say ditto, because, that's how we came on your platform, really, was by being aware of this space in the first place. And, as I mentioned, my mind was a bit detonated when I saw what you actually managed to do with all the data, because the future of work, like with Dave as well. And the reason for our company is because that's the things that we're interested in, and hence why you're on the podcast. So I think just for the same, the metaverse, Web 3.0, all of those things, and the crossovers between, and the synergies, and what the future is going to hold in there is going to be amazing. And it won't be just single technologies, but it'll be the recombination of technologies that bring about new emergent processes and ways of working in the future. I think it's going to be a bit of a wild ride. It's going to be like being on technology LSD, I think, in the next 10 to 15 years.
Just micro, mate. Just micro.
Micro dose.
Right on. Okay, so now this is probably gonna, this will be quite boring in contrast. And I know, I've been in this space for a while now, and I've heard many a futurist on stage talking about the incredible, futuristic roles that they dream up with, and I always come back to the harsh realities of this for most organizations, governments, HR departments, is that's so nowhere near their reality, right? So it's literally still in the blocking and tackling basics, trying to get this right. So I think it is a bit more pragmatic in my view, as to what people need to do and what I'm looking forward to. So I've been talking recently a lot about a concept I refer to as sustainable automation, and that it can be confusing without explanation. But you might think of it as responsible automation or a sustainable people strategy. But ultimately, I mean, I've tied it off at the UN sustainability goal level. I've brought it back down to corporate level, and I am looking forward to the day when every board around the world, along with looking at carbon footprint and diversity, equity, inclusion, they are looking at sustainable automation. It needs to be that level of rigor and governance to say, if we're going to automate, then we're going to look after our people. How are we going to do that? How are we going to measure that, report on that? So that's a day I'm looking forward to. I know Yasmin Allen, who's the chair of the Australian Stock Exchange and was the chair of Fathom early on, has now moved on to greener pastures. She's a big believer in this, and she talks to boards everywhere, all over the world, and it's something that we're promoting and trying to get more boards aware of. That whether they're doing it with Fathom or anyone else, this is a critical step. Otherwise, we just keep displacing as we innovate and as we automate as companies.
Yeah,
definitely. Amazing insights. Greg, thank you so much for your time and for being on the podcast. And looking forward to seeing Fathom and Pearson go strength to strength in the next couple of years, months, and whatnot as well.
Right on. Dave, Pete, thank you. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, lovely. It was awesome. Thanks very much, Greg. Enjoy your rest of your Friday afternoon. Bye.
Will do. Cheers.
See ya. Bye.
That's the end of today's episode. Thanks for listening. What's Next is brought to you by The Next. We are workplace futurists and transformation facilitators. You can reach us on the web at www.thenextnxt.com.au. Please ensure you subscribe to our channel to ensure you don't miss our up and coming episodes.